It was me, Austin. It was me all along, Austin.
What's up, guys? I'm DK, and you're watching Pro Wrestling What If, the series where I look at the different what if scenarios as terms of the world that we call professional wrestling. In October of 1998, The Undertaker had mentioned that him and Paul Bearer would unleash a ministry of darkness and a plague of evil within the WWE/F. And through the coming months, Undertaker would continue to grow the Ministry of Darkness, and by early 1999, the Ministry of Darkness would want control over the WWE/F from Vince McMahon and the corporation. This ended up leading to a Hell in a Cell match between The Undertaker and Big Boss Man, which saw The Undertaker defeat Big Boss Man, and we all know what ended up happening after that match. This would end up leading to The Undertaker and the Ministry of Darkness abducting Vince McMahon's daughter Stephanie, which would end up leading to the corporation and the Ministry of Darkness uniting to become the corporate ministry. Undertaker for weeks had teased a higher power within the group, and with weeks of anticipation, the reveal had ended up happening on the June 7th, 1999 edition of Raw, which ended up having Vince McMahon himself revealed as the higher power of the corporate ministry. Now, last week on the channel, I had discussed about one of the best moments as terms to 1999 with Chris Jericho's WWE/F debut, and what would have happened if that didn't happen. So it only felt fitting that I would basically now talk about one of the most dog moments of 1999 and see what would happen if perhaps it actually was better than it was. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about what if Vince McMahon wasn't the higher power. And for this, I'm going to be talking about 5 candidates that I think could have been the higher power, whether it's from different interviews or what a lot of people mention should have been the higher power. And if you end up enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share this to all your friends, subscribe, and press the notification bell for when future episodes get released, and leave a comment down below about today's topic or suggesting a future topic for an episode of Pro Wrestling What If. Number 1, Christopher Daniels. Yes, I'm talking about the fallen angel Christopher Daniels, the wrestler you probably know if you had watched either Ring of Honor or TNA in the early and mid 2000s. And Christopher Daniels, while under a developmental deal with WWE/F, was originally pitched by Vince Russo to be the higher power of the corporate ministry, but ultimately Vince McMahon had declined this idea due to him feeling like Christopher Daniels was too small to fit the role. And the reason I wanted to bring up Christopher Daniels first is because out of the 5 that I have chosen for this video, I feel that Christopher Daniels would be the least likely to have the group succeed if it wasn't Vince. And it's nothing against Christopher Daniels. I enjoyed watching the matches he pulled off in Ring of Honor and TNA, especially that famous 3-way match he had with AJ Styles and Samoa Joe in 2005. But at this time in 1999, it would have made no sense for Christopher Daniels, who was relatively unknown, to be the higher power, and it wouldn't have made sense for Christopher Daniels to be more superior than The Undertaker himself. Even if Vince McMahon did go with Christopher Daniels, he would end up having cold feet about it at some point and pulled the plug on the storyline. And throughout the remainder of Christopher Daniels' contract, he most likely would have been a part of the light heavyweight or cruiserweight division, depending on how long his contract was. Probably would have sent him back to developmental to repackage him with a different character name before being called up, or just end up deciding to release Christopher Daniels overall. And I mean, if he does get released, maybe we would still get Christopher Daniels' career as terms to Ring of Honor and TNA in the early 2000s. Number 2, Shane McMahon. Even though I think no member of the McMahon family should have been the higher power, I think it would have made a little bit more sense for Shane McMahon rather than Vince McMahon to be the higher power. In the real timeline, Vince McMahon was kicked out of the corporation by Shane due to him focusing too much on Stephanie rather than the faction itself, and it was Shane who had ultimately decided to merge the two groups together to become the corporate ministry. And during this time, there was a storyline being built up of Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin possibly letting bygones be bygones to take down the Ministry of Darkness due to Steve Austin saving preventing Stephanie McMahon from being sacrificed into a marriage with The Undertaker. And so I feel we could have seen Shane McMahon betray the corporation by becoming the higher power and ending the corporation instead of having it merge to become the corporate ministry. And Shane would actually help The Undertaker try to gain control over the WWE/F over time, and this storyline could have lasted until at least Survivor Series or at WrestleMania 2000, depending on if certain circumstances still occur, like the real timeline that I will go into later on. Instead, we ended up having Vince McMahon be revealed as the higher power, and I feel like it was only done so that they could continue the ongoing Vince McMahon Steve Austin storyline with what little life that storyline had left. And it's not like that storyline would have even lasted a bit longer, considering with Stone Cold Steve Austin taking a break after Survivor Series 1999 to have his neck surgery. Number 3. Shawn Michaels. In early 1999, Shawn Michaels had served as the commissioner of the WWE/F, and his role as an authority figure could have ended up being revealed that he was secretly a part of the Ministry of Darkness the entire time. At one point, Shawn Michaels was on top of the mountain with being the WWE/F champion, with the spotlight constantly being on him, especially with the real life politics going on backstage involving him, something that can be contributed into the sake of the storyline, with the focus of the company no longer revolving around him, but around Stone Cold Steve Austin, who had won the WWE/F championship from Michaels at WrestleMania 14, and especially The Rock, who was on the rise and was a focal point of the corporation in late 98 to early 99 and had real life heat with Shawn Michaels. And at this point, Shawn Michaels was not the born-again Christian we saw in 2002, so this could have been a good role for Shawn Michaels and definitely a better option than Vince McMahon. Number 4. Ted DiBiase. The Undertaker made his debut at Survivor Series 1990, and the one who had introduced The Undertaker into the WWE/F was none other than the $1 Million Man himself. And let's not forget that it was Ted DiBiase who also brought in the man known as the Ringmaster, later known to be Stone Cold Steve Austin. And although Ted DiBiase was no longer an active in-ring competitor like Shawn Michaels at this time too, DiBiase would have been a great mouthpiece for the group besides The Undertaker himself. And the timing would have pretty much been on point, as Ted DiBiase initially left WWE/F after the In Your House Beware of Dog 2 event in May of 1996 before signing with WCW for 3 years, thus being able to be a free agent right around the time of when the actual reveal of the higher power had happened. And this would have been an interesting version of the character, as Ted DiBiase in real life became a Christian minister, but at the end of the day, everyone's got a price for the $1 Million Man, and Ted DiBiase could have bought his way as the higher power of the Ministry of Darkness. And finally, number 5, Jake the Snake Roberts. Jake Roberts was pretty much the original Lord of Darkness before The Undertaker made his debut. This would have made so much sense due to the partnership between Undertaker and Jake Roberts back in the later days of the Golden Era, and could have reformed that partnership in the Attitude Era. And it was Jake Roberts during the time of his born-again Christian gimmick in 1996 that had lost the match to Stone Cold Steve Austin at King of the Ring that led to Austin saying his famous Austin 316 catchphrase for the first time, and would get him to the fame that he ended up achieving. So Jake Roberts would have had lots of tie-ins and long-term storytelling aspects into which he, in my opinion, would have been the absolute best fit to be the higher power of the Ministry of Darkness. Imagine what the group could have pulled off if Jake Roberts was the higher power. The twisted things that would have happened with both Undertaker and Jake Roberts together once again. Perhaps doing the snake bite like they did with Randy Savage back in 1991, but maybe it's with Stone Cold Steve Austin to exact revenge from King of the Ring 1996. However, it was around this time that Jake Roberts' substance abuse issues had gotten really bad, and that his time back in the WWE/F for this storyline would have likely been short. And a prime example of that is what we seen in October of that year at the indie show of the Heroes of Legends event that seen Jake Roberts really intoxicated before his match with Jim Neidhart. And especially if The Undertaker still suffered his groin and pectoral muscle injury, which was the unfortunate circumstance I had alluded to earlier in the video, that it seemed like no matter who ended up being the higher power, it would have still had the Ministry of Darkness end shortly after Undertaker's injuries with no one big enough to carry the group. But if The Undertaker somehow didn't get injured during this time, who would he have fought at WrestleMania 2000, and would the streak have continued?